During the meeting, Eneka's mother recounted the harrowing experience her daughter had endured before they let her go. She demanded justice for her daughter and insisted that Obina be held accountable for his actions. King Uzo was torn. He loved the son deeply but understood the gravity of the situation. However, instead of punishing Obina, he chose to offer a large sum of money to Nneka's family as compensation. He also made a generous donation to the school. Queen Ngozi and her daughters were dismayed by the king's decision.
Once upon a time, in a beautiful village called the Uzomu Kingdom, there lived a wise and beloved king named King Uzo. He ruled over his kingdom with fairness and kindness, and his people admired him. King Uzo was married to Queen Ngozi, and they were blessed with three children, two lovely girls named Chiamaka and Nkechi, and a young boy named Obinna. Obinna was the youngest in the royal family and was the only son. He was the heir to the throne. He was a happy child and always surrounded by luxury and love. However, Obinna had a flaw. He was stubborn and often did not listen to his parents' advice. From a very young age, Obinna was given access to the latest technologies and gadgets. He would spend hours playing games on his phone and neglected his studies. His parents, especially his mothers and sisters, worried about his lack of discipline and responsibility. One day, Queen Ngozi sat Obinna down for a serious talk. "Obinna, my son," she began gently, "you must focus on your studies and prepare yourself for the future. Being a prince comes with great responsibilities." But Obinna shrugged his shoulders and replied, "Mother, I don't need to worry about all that. I will become a king one day and everything will be perfectly fine." The queen sighed, knowing that her son's attitude was becoming a concern. She decided to speak to King Uzo about their son's behavior. "Uzo, our son Obinna is becoming too spoilt." Queen Ngozi expressed her worry to the king. "He spends all his time playing games and neglects his studies. We must guide him before it is too late." King Uzo, however, was blinded by the love he had for Obinna. He believed that his son would mature and grow into his role as king when the time comes. He dismissed the queen's concerns, saying, "Ngozi, let Obinna enjoy his youth. He will learn when the time is right." As Obinna grew older, his behavior worsened. He started hanging out with friends who were not good influences. They would sneak into the palace and cause mischief, taking advantages of Obinna's status as the prince. One day, Obinna met a girl named Nneka at school. She was intelligent, focused on her studies, and had no interest in Obinna's wealth or status. Obinna, however, became infatuated with Nneka and tried to impress her with expensive gifts and promises. "Nneka, please be my girlfriend," Obinna pleaded one day, showing her a handful of money and a new phone. But Nneka politely declined, saying, "Obinna, I appreciate your gift, but I want to focus on my education and future." Obinna couldn't accept rejection. He felt humiliated and angry that Nneka didn't want to be with him despite all his efforts. He confided in his friends, who encouraged him to do something drastic to win Nneka's attention. One afternoon, they followed Nneka as she walked home from school and kidnapped her. Nneka's ordeal was traumatic. She was hurt and scared, and when she finally reached home, she tearfully told her mother what had happened. Nneka's mother was horrified and immediately reported the incident to the school authorities. They in turn contacted the palace, informing them of Obina's involvement in the kidnap. The king and the queen were shocked and saddened by the news. They knew they had to address the situation seriously. They called for a meeting with Nneka's family and the school officials. During the meeting, Nneka's mother recounted the harrowing experience her daughter had endured before they let her go. She demanded justice for her daughter and insisted that Obina be held accountable for his actions. King Uzo was torn. He loved his son deeply but understood the gravity of the situation. However, instead of punishing Obina, he chose to offer a large sum of money to Nneka's family as compensation. He also made a generous donation to the school. Queen Ngozi and her daughters were dismayed by the king's decision. They believed that Obina needed to face consequences for his behavior to learn and grow. King Uzo, our son cannot continue like this, Queen Ngozi pleaded, with tears in her eyes. He needs discipline and guidance, not just money to cover up his mistakes. But the king remained firm in his stance, believing that Obina would eventually learn from his experiences. The palace returned to its normal routine, but tension lingered within the royal family. Obina continued to live a life of privilege, shielded from the consequences of his actions. As the days passed, Obina's rebellious behavior escalated. He spent more time with his gangster friends, who introduced him to smoking and drinking. His actions and attitude began to trouble not just his family but also the entire kingdom. One day, Queen Ngozi couldn't tolerate Obina's behavior any longer. She approached her husband, King Uzo, and spoke to him privately about their son's action. Uzo, we can't ignore Obina's behavior any longer. He needs to be warned about the consequences of his actions, she pleaded with him. King Uzo listened to his wife and realized that she was right. He understood that Obina's behavior could harm his future as the king, so he decided to have a serious talk with Obina. The king invited Obina to a father and son lunch, hoping to counsel him about his attitude. As they sat down to eat, the king began, Obina, I've noticed some things about your behavior that bothers me. You must understand that being a prince comes with responsibilities. Obina, feeling uneasy about the conversation, asked, Father, is everything alright? Why are we having this talk? The king replied calmly, Obina, I want what is best for you. Your actions will shape your future. Please listen to my advice, my dear son. Obina pretended to listen and nodded along, but deep down, he believed that his father would always cover up for him no matter what he did. A few days later, it was Obina's birthday, and he was excited to celebrate his birthday with his friends. His father warned him to be careful, but Obina brushed it off, saying, Father, I'm not a kid anymore. I'll be just fine. His friends planned a surprise birthday party for him at a club far away from the village. Obina was initially disappointed with the choice of venue, but agreed to go along with his friend's plan. As they partied into the night, Obina drank heavily, unaware of his friend's ulterior motives. Suddenly, the police arrived due to noise complaints. Obina's friend fled, leaving him alone at the club. The police, seeing a young boy drunk at a questionable place, questioned Obina and eventually took him to the station for further questioning. Obina, in his drunken state, mentioned being the prince, but the police found it hard to believe. Back at the palace, King Uzo grew worried when Obina didn't return home that night. He tried calling Obinna's phone, but it was left at the club. Realizing something was wrong, the king sent the palace guards to search for his son. Meanwhile, Obinna spent the night in a police cell, too intoxicated to explain himself properly. It wasn't until the next morning that he was coherent enough to talk to the police. He mentioned being the prince, but the police were skeptical. Finally, Obinna was allowed to make a phone call. He dialed home and explained the situation to his family, and they quickly arranged to bail him out of the police cell and bring him back to the palace. When Obinna returned home, he was met with a mixture of relief and disappointment from his family. Queen Ngozi was visibly upset, while his sisters were concerned for his well-being. King Uzo sat Obinna down for another serious talk. Obinna, your actions have consequences. You cannot continue to behave recklessly and expect everything to be fine. You must learn from this experience, the king said. Obinna, feeling ashamed of himself, promised to do better, but deep down, he still held onto the belief that his father would always protect him as the king. The palace returned to its usual routine, but the incident had left a mark on everyone. Obinna realized that his actions had consequences and as being the prince didn't exempt him from responsibilities. At the palace, the atmosphere was heavy with disappointment and anger. The king and the queen were extremely upset with Obinna for his reckless behavior. Obinna, on the other hand, felt a sense of shame and betrayal. He didn't believe that his friends, whom he trusted, could lead him into such trouble. The king decided to have a private conversation with Obinna once again. He spoke to Obinna about his attitude and reminded him of the responsibilities that would come with being the future king of Uzomu Kingdom. Obinna, being a king is not just about power and privilege. It is about leading your people with wisdom and compassion, the king explained. Obinna listened attentively this time, and for the first time, everything his father said started to make sense to him. He realized the weight of the expectations placed upon him as the heir to the throne and the importance of his role in the kingdom's future. After the conversation, Obinna sat alone to reflect on his father's words. He felt overwhelmed by the thought of being responsible for an entire kingdom. Deciding to take a break, he pushed aside his worries and chose not to take the matter seriously. Meanwhile, King Uzo's health began to decline rapidly. One day, while walking in the palace compound, he collapsed, clutching his chest in pain. The palace guards rushed to his aid and carried him inside. The king's illness worsened with each passing day, even after they had contacted the palace physicians. Despite the efforts of the physicians and healers, his conditions did not improve. The people of the kingdom, including Obinna, prayed fervently to the gods for the king's recovery. As weeks went by, the king realized that his time was nearing its end. He called for the elders of the village and his wife, Queen Ngozi, to gather in his chambers. Queen Ngozi, holding on to hope, refused to believe that her husband's end was near. But the king insisted on writing down his final words and wishes. He expressed his belief in Obina's potential to be a great king and urged everyone not to give up on him. 3 days later, the king called Obina to his bedside and shared his last words of advice and encouragement. It was as if the king knew his time had come. Obina, my son, remember the lessons I have taught you. Be a just and compassionate ruler. Your people will look up to you for guidance," the king said with a weak voice. Obina listened intently, feeling a mix of sorrow and determination. He promised his father that he would honor his legacy and strive to be the best king he could ever be. Just 2 hours after their conversation, King Uzo took his last breath. The news of his passing spread quickly, and the palace was filled with grief and mourning. Obinna was heartbroken by the loss of his father. He realized that he hadn't spent enough quality time with him and regretted not taking his father's advice more seriously. Weeks passed, but Obinna couldn't shake off the sadness of losing his father. Queen Ngozi became his pillar of strength, constantly reminding him of his responsibilities and the legacy that he must uphold. As time went by, Obinna matured into a wise and responsible leader. He immersed himself in learning from the elders, gaining insight into ruling and leadership. The elders of the village decided it was time to crown him the king of Uzomo Kingdom. The coronation ceremony was a grand affair, attended by people from all corners of the kingdom. Obina ascended the throne as King Obina, carrying with him the teachings and values instilled by his father and mother. Under his reign, Uzomo Kingdom flourished and its people lived in harmony and prosperity. King Obina's rule was marked by fairness, empathy, and dedication to his people. He ensured that young boys didn't live a reckless life, following from his story as a young teenager. He became a beloved king, respected not only within his kingdom but also by neighboring lands. His story transformed into a tale of resilience, growth, and leadership, inspiring generations to come. Uzomo Kingdom thrived under the reign of King Obinna, a testament to the enduring legacy of a wise king and a united people. Obinna later got married to a pretty maiden named Olamma. Olamma became queen of Uzomo Kingdom. She was so supportive and stood by Obinna's side through it all. As the years passed, Queen Olamma delivered a bouncing baby boy, the heir to Uzomo's kingdom after the reign of King Obinna. The moral lesson of this story is that taking responsibility for our actions, seeking guidance from wise ones, understanding consequences, learning from mistakes, and embodying qualities of effective leadership are essential for personal growth and success. Thanks for watching this captivating story on African stories and folktales. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories. Thank you.